Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and don't let that other video alarm you. You know, the one about the thing. I haven't given up on Langrisser. In fact, right on time, here's the 15th issue of the Langrisser Lookout. This is a bi-weekly series where I go over some noteworthy game news and then follow it up with an update on my own account progress. So let's start with the important stuff, which is the Community News Roundup. In the last issue, we talked a lot about the new characters and content coming out on the global servers in March, but one thing we didn't talk about was new SP characters. So there are three categories of SP information floating around right now. There's confirmed content, there's upcoming content, and then there's rumored content. So we might as well talk about the confirmed stuff first, since it's solid and we know a lot more about it. And in this case, namely, that's Sigma's upcoming assassin-based SP class. Sigma is a main series protagonist who has always been hampered by existing in a kind of weird in-between space, where he's meant to be used as a long-distance zoning and sniping unit, but whose finishing potential is extremely situational. Zilong seems to have answered the question of how we're supposed to use Sigma with a resounding as an assassin. So his new SP talent is a slightly rejigged version of his original one. Instead of getting 15% attack when attacking, you get 15% attack when entering battle, so this should work on enemy phase as well. And you'll see why that's important in a second. Previously, you would have to end your turn on defensive terrain to get a new action with no mobility and +2 range. In the new class, you gain the range and additional mobility, but you don't get to immediately act again. That's okay though, because you can use this action to set up the Ranger's Mark part of your 3-cost skill. After you launch an attack, then your extra range and mobility are converted into a turn's worth of 30% damage reduction. Kind of a nice little workflow there. He gets a new 1-cost passive that lets him ignore guard if he's attacking a target within 3 spaces, and also allows assassin-type troops, such as the upcoming Faceless Assassin Soldiers, to attack alongside him, as long as he has his SP talent's range and mobility boost active, of course. He also gets a new 2-cost skill that lets him teleport within 1 space of the victim of his Ranger's Mark, and then attack with no melee penalty. If he also has his SP talent's buff, which he should since he must have marked his target in order to use his teleport, then both he and his victim attack each other directly, one-on-one, with no soldiers involved. After this combat, he heals 50% HP and gains boosted counterattack damage and mobility. So again, on this theme of flow, these skills all complement each other quite nicely, at least on paper. He sets up his Ranger's Mark and gains range and movement. Then he teleports in and attacks the hero directly with no melee penalty, healing up and gaining damage reduction and counterattack damage to make him a thorn in the side of anyone who might try to pick him off out of position. I say on paper because I'm not 100% sure if this turtle mode is really going to save him from anything, or if his sneaky duel mode is going to allow him to reliably eliminate a variety of targets. I'm sure the PvP pros out there are already putting him through the ringer. Either way, it'll be an interesting new dynamic use case for an old hero. And I think he's a good example of what they're trying to do with these SP classes, which is essentially turn a unit into a completely new, different thing. In his SP class, he's going to use different troops than what you're used to, he's going to use different gear than what you're used to, and essentially have a whole different playstyle, the same way that SP Elwyn does. So that's the confirmed information, so let's talk briefly about some upcoming information that's been dangled in front of us in the form of a player poll to determine the next SP unit. The final voting came down to a battle between Lewin, who's one of the main characters of Langrisser 3, who's sadly stuck in R-tier purgatory right now, and Hein, a perennial fave from the much-loved Langrisser 2. Personally, I was rooting for Lance because the original Langrisser needs more love, but maybe next time. Anyway, Hein won, so he'll be getting a new SP class as well. The details aren't 100% fleshed out like they are for Sigma, but his SP talent is supposed to start him off with a max stack of his talent buffs, and also increase the range and span of his skills. In the marketing for the poll, this was rationalized as an attempt to compensate for his slow warm-up time and his short legs, which does make sense. You basically need 5 turns of setup to get Hein to his full potential through his talent, so this should solve that. And then finally we have the rumored content, and I'm only going to touch on it briefly rather than go into details about all the rumors, because it's not confirmed and we don't really know that much. But there has been talk of an upcoming SP version of Matthew that would see him getting a tanking class. People are speculating that this would be his Dark Matthew that we've been seeing elsewhere in the past. And personally, I'm holding out hope that Dark Matthew is something different, whether a different character or something along those lines. Something about making him a tank doesn't really sit right with me. It doesn't synergize well with the rest of his design, in terms of his 3-cost skill, his talent, his unique Kizuna band. And it doesn't really fit well with his positioning as the DPS archetype among the original 3 story characters. So making him a tank would be another giant middle finger to Grenier. Anyway, that's a rough rundown of our SP future, and obviously we'll learn more about upcoming SP units, the details of Hein, and so on in the future, and we'll cover those in a future episode. So the only other PvE news of note is that we're getting a couple of dangling events this month. We have access to the Intro to a.k.a. world map events right now, although some players are reporting that they still haven't shown up for them, even several days after they're supposed to have launched. So it sounds like we might have a potential Z-Long on our hands. We've also got the return of the Gerald and Layla Halloween skin in the shop for 188 skin vouchers, as well as a couple fan art soldier skins. Okay, so that's it for the news, so let's move on to the Kong update for October 26th. And as always, we'll start with a summoning update. This was actually a pretty eventful cycle for summoning. So first I had my 80% shot at boosting my Jugler up to 6 stars. Unfortunately, it took me 2 full pities to make it happen, getting an off-banner Elwyn in 100 summons, and then finally getting a Landius I could convert in another 100 summons. Then I thought I'd cleanse the palette before the Tree Sage banner with a YOLO multi on the Betty and Amelia banner, and fortunately I did manage to get my first copy of Amelia in only 10 summons. The plan was really only to use 10 summons there anyway, since I didn't really care to go deep for either of those characters, and I could always carry that 10 over to pity for the Sage banner anyway. But I didn't have to do that, so finally we had the launch of the Sage of the Trees and Helena, and I was coming into this with no pity, and I knew I was going to go hard on this banner for my new favorite unit. So I got Helena in my first 40 summons, and then I went all the way to pity for a second Helena, and then I went all the way to pity again for an off-banner Lana, and finally I drew my first Sage in another 70 summons, so 310 summons in total. After all this hectic action, my lifetime SSR rate dropped from 1.78 to 1.74%. Now, for an Awakening update, I did of course awaken the Sage of the Trees right away. I was pretty pleased to find that it wasn't very difficult, even at 3 stars, so I made a video of the process right here. So, moving on to Gates, the winner of the 9th Gates of Folly community poll was Wheeler, which allowed me to finish him off just yesterday. Here's a picture of him getting his 6th star, and obviously I'm so proud of him, so thank you folks for voting him up for the past several weeks. Other than Wheeler, I also got, let's see, where is she? Where is she hiding? She has that skin on that I'm not used to. I got Lana up to 5 star, thanks to that off-banner summon. And I got Ren up to 5 star as well, and paused her there, even though she's a character who really benefits from that 6 star. I kinda need to work on other priorities for now. And I also got Licorice up to 4 star. So there were a lot of upgrades here in the last couple of weeks. My 10th Gates of Folly community poll is live now, and as always the poll is going to be active all day Monday until the in-game server reset, and that's when I'll start farming up whoever wins the vote all the way up until the next issue of the Lookout in 2 weeks. So now that I've had a chance to get a feel for my Season 5 box, I'm going to populate the poll with new units that I might want to focus on for Season 6, as I look to start preparing for the multi-tank Glory and Empire meta. So characters that I think might give me some crossover value. Let's move on to gear. So despite the fact that I've been playing since launch, I somehow managed to have had one of the best 2 weeks in terms of gear. Not necessarily in terms of quantity, but certainly in terms of quality. I got my first ever pair of Divine Boots from the cheerleader event that just ended, and it's probably like the first good piece of gear that I've gotten from one of those little event rewards. I do have a couple of potential uses for them coming up. I have them on Ren right now. I'm not seeing them here. They're not jumping out at me, probably because they're on someone's feet right now. But I have the potential to move them around next season if needed. Obviously, anyone who watched my Tree Sage summoning video knows that I finally got my first ever extreme magic bow. And this was the #1 item on my wish list for months. Finally. So I'm so happy to have that. 1 copy. I also got... This was a surprise. Let's see. Oh, there's those Divine Boots. So yeah, they're sitting on Ren for now. This is all stuff that I should be dismantling, to be honest. So much extra stuff. Here it is. I got a second Oath of Justice from a map event. Just from a Disoriented Arrow or Temple Run or whatever. I got this and Giant's Resolve. My first one obviously is sitting here on Jugler, but now I'll be able to give this one to Listel, at least for now. And I'll have the potential to move it to Leaden or one of the other tanks in a big sea of tanks next season. So, actually pretty great luck getting my first Divine Boots, my first Extreme Magic Bow, and my second Oath of Justice, all things that I can use right away. Now, let's move on to my grunts real quick. As you know, I've been trying to focus on one key node from each tree, based on what I think I'm going to need, not only for my mythical Apex box this season, but for whatever happens next season too. With infantry, there's not much going on, because it's infantry. For my lancers, I'm chipping away at their hit point nodes, trying to make some bulky, spiky boys. Same kind of deal for my cavalry. I'm slowly working my defensive stats up, and debating whether Heaven's Guards or Templars might be worth it for me soon. There's not much going on in my Flying and Aqua tree now that I've got their cores maxed, but I do like to kind of come in and admire this sometimes. For Assassins, I'm slowly working their attack nodes up, and my Holy and Demon training, I just maxed Hellfire Archers, and so I'm working on defensive nodes and stuff for now until I decide on new troops. So the only thing that's really left to cover is my group. And the main news on the bonds front is, unsurprisingly, the Sage of the Trees. I had saved up all the materials I needed to fully master his classes and max his bonds before I got him. I also made a short series of videos for his Gates of Fate battles. Just in case you haven't summoned him and you're interested in reading more about his backstory, you can check those out, and I basically go through all the dialogue for you. So that's going to be it for the Kong update. Thanks so much for tuning in, and thank you as always for your feedback and your advice and your encouraging comments. Stay tuned for the next episode of Should You Summon later this week, and then of course I'll catch you in the next Langrisser Lookout.